Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Brandon Jamal Baker, author of the book Where I Belong by Brandon Baker, available on Amazon. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, Where I Belong with Brandon J. Baker. Today, I want to share a story with you guys about racism. Trigger warning for those out there who have experienced racism. I just think that it's imperative that I speak about this issue because it's something that's very close to my heart, and also because what's currently going on in the news actually happened in my hometown. So those of you that know me know that I'm, never shy about where I come from. I'm from West Covina, California, right in the San Gabriel Valley. So that's where I spent most of my life. I also lived in Pomona in my earlier years, which is also another city that deals with a lot of racism within the Black and brown community. So I've been very vulnerable and open about my experiences with racism, both as the victim and also as the perpetrator of that. Um, and it's always been within the Black and brown community. So, I talked about, when I was 13 years old, my first encounter with racism was me and my friend Ibram, rest in peace. We were chased by older Hispanic men, called us N-words, mayates, and all this stuff, because we were dealing with two girls who were Hispanic. And so that triggered them to respond to us with a lot of hatred. And so that experience, that fear that I had, um, it just caused me to respond with violence. Because I remember after that event, I went and got a gun. I was 13 years old when I got my first gun, and I was like, that's never going to happen again. I also talked about, my friend Dante being shot and killed inside a McDonald's drive-through by Hispanics, and how that shifted, the paradigm for my life, and how I viewed Hispanics after that. I also write about my experience in Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall, the first time I went to Juvenile Hall, when I was forced to fight two Hispanic kids that were from La Puente because of a staff member who set it up. It was basically like gladiator school. Then I talk about my time in LA County Jail with a lot of race riots, especially being in Pomona Court, where in the San Gabriel Valley is predominantly Hispanic gangs, while there are black gangs, both Blood and Crips from Pasadena, Duarte, West Covina, Pomona, but the hub of San Gabriel Valley is always going to be Southsiders. And so um, that shifted, my perspective when it came to Hispanics. Then I also talk about my time in prison and, how I didn't have to go to prison to have animosity in my heart towards Hispanics, because that's just how I grew up. Like, that's what I was raised around. I've also been vocal about my changes, that how I was able to change my perspective and how I've learned to embrace, all people, and especially my brown brothers and sisters, because me personally, I cannot be against another group of people who are marginalized and also oppressed just like I am, because, I understand the system and the purpose of it is to pit us against one another. But the story I'm going to share actually happened in Pomona. Um, you know, my nana, who I love like more than anything, who was a big support system for me, growing up, especially within my spiritual foundation, and also, throughout my incarceration. She was the one that just always planted those seeds of faith and, you know, giving my life to God, and once I do, the things will work itself out. And so I also talk about my pops, who I love, is my favorite person. This is his mother. Um, and so they were in Pomona, and she was shot by Hispanics, her and also my uncle. They were both shot. By the grace of God, they both survived, those gunshots. But those wounds were still there, and that trauma is still there within my family. Um, and so that also added to like the hatred that I had, because these were personal encounters and experiences that happened in my life. So when I see videos like, what happened in West Covina, in my hometown, where, you know, black people are, spit on, called the N word, just for being black, just for being there in that area, So that was very hurtful for me to see that, and it definitely triggered me. I was very triggered, seeing that video. Um, and also, just a couple of months ago, about 6 months ago, there was, the Operation Burning Bridges, where federal agents, basically raided and had an indictment on La Puente, on, the Southside gang out there. But me knowing the history and seeing all of this stuff, all the videos, it all started with the shooting, over there, like off Hacienda, that area over there. And it started with a confrontation with a black man. And, allegedly, I'll use the word alleged, but, it's all over the internet. You guys can see it. But, they confronted the guy, and first they dissed, neighborhood. They were assuming this guy was from neighborhood, I guess. And then they followed that with the N word, with the ER at the end of it. So this is not anything new to me, racism. This is something that I grew up around. And people, when they hear West Covina, they think, oh, man, there's nothing going on out there. And I'm like, if you understand the history, it's always been a lot of racism out there. And sadly, this is what's still going on right now today. So for me, I was just very intentional about healing from that past trauma and trying to bring our communities together, the black and brown communities. So a lot of my friends that I deal with right now are Hispanics. I'm right here in the heart of East LA. I don't shy away from the culture. I invest in the community because that's just me. Like me personally, I can't, say I'm about something and I'm not doing it. I have to practice what I preach, and I also have to learn what I teach. And so, like I said, a lot of my friends that are Hispanics were former gang members from some of the most racist, violent gangs towards black people. And this is why I continue to extend that olive branches, because I know that I have changed, and I know that they can change as well too. But the bottom line is, for those who are on the sideline and not saying anything, then that means you basically just took a side. So I do have a few friends that reached out to me, and I want to personally thank each and every one of you who, sent me a DM or something when the video came out, because I posted it on my Instagram. Both, I reposted it and also put it on my story. So clearly this was something that was, resonating within my heart and mind. I was very troubled by it. And I also go back to West Covina a lot. So if anybody follows me, on my Instagram or social media, they know, like, I love my hometown. I'm not shy. I'll go back there pretty often. And who's to say that that couldn't happen to me? I mean, this happened to me in the past. Who's to say it couldn't happen to me right now, today? And so for those who reached out to me, checked in, I appreciate you, specifically those who are, Hispanic. I appreciate, you reaching out. I would really appreciate if people, from your community could be more vocal about what's actually going on here. Because one thing that I do see is that, whenever something happens with a black person, who does something horrendous, like assault, street vendors who are just trying to make a living, or make racist statements, or, hurtful statements about ICE, or whatever the case may be. The brown community, I see, like, are very vocal about it, and speaking out against, black people. But I haven't really seen the outpour or that same kind of energy when something like this happens, where, just random black people, who are literally saying, man, God bless you, man, Jesus loves you, man, and they're getting spit on and called the N-word in my hometown. And people are not, like, as vocal about it, and I really wish that they would, because at the end of the day, that is the only way we're going to be able to overcome this. It's like, when there's hate and there's only hate, guess what? That hate is loud, right? It's magnified. But when the love comes, even if the love is subtle, it overpowers that hate. And when people are being silent, then that's not operating out of love. In fact, that's just, allowing room for more hate to come in. Because in that time of silence, you're going to have people like me thinking about, damn, they really don't like me. That's been my experience growing up. I'm not naive to this. When I was 13 years old and they called me Mayate and called the girl I was with nigger lover and all this stuff, I wasn't a gang member. I was just a 13-year-old kid. My experience in juvenile incarceration, when I was led to a day room to fight two other kids, um, I wasn't a menace. I mean, I was from the gang at that point, but I was 13 years old. I didn't, I wasn't putting in any work or anything like that. Um, and so I'm definitely triggered by this situation. When I think about my nana, just a sweet woman, um, she didn't ask to get shot. She wasn't from a gang, so this stuff, it actually happens. I also remember living in Azusa way back in the 80s, the mid to late 80s, and seeing NK on the wall and move out monkeys and all this stuff. People's houses getting put on fire. This stuff is all, you can just look up, check the history. This is not me giving my opinion about stuff. This stuff is very well documented. This was considered a hate gang, and multiple hate crimes. So once again, this is a very serious issue. I think people need to be more vocal about this issue, but I think we need to talk about ways to bring our communities together. And so, like I said, I just go about, doing that in my own personal life. Like I said, I'm also a youth mentor, and many of the people that I mentor are not Black youth, they're Hispanics. Um, and so I just think that we need to just, foster, opportunities for us to come together. Because at the end of the day, I will always promote a message of peace. I will always promote a message of unity, solidarity, because at the end of the day, that is the only way we're going to be able to overcome the power structure. The system was designed and created to do what it does, but we as a people have to have that collective conscience to be smarter than what the system is doing to us by not allowing ourselves to be placed inside of that system, and so once again, man, I just want to affirm the people who are, doing the good work to bring it in, to racism, because at the end of the day, um, I always mention it before, 2042 is right around the corner. 2042 is going to be the first time that America is going to be known as a minority majority nation. And so you have to envision what kind of world, what kind of nation are we going to be? Is this going to be a nation that every time we pick up our phones and scroll down, our timeline, we're going to see videos like this? Or are we going to see, collective conscious and people coming together and uplifting one another, supporting one another? That's what I want to see. And if I didn't believe that it could happen, I wouldn't be here making videos like this right now. Because like I said, I've been able to change my way of thinking, my ideology, and also know other people who don't look like me, who had the same kind of perspective as me, in regards to racism. They've been able to change too. So once again, let's come together and bring about this change. And when we see situations like this, we have to be vocal. You have to be able to speak out about it, because your silence, it really is violence, And so, like I said, just speak up and speak out. Martin Luther King say, an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. And so we have to come together, and like I said, and once again, for me, I've been very vocal, not just on issues dealing with the Black community, but also issues dealing with the Hispanic community. Also going back to the ICE situation, I've personally been to the ICE Adelanto Geo Detention Center. I've been out there protesting, and so I'm just not the kind of person that's just going to be on the sideline when I see an injustice. When I go back into the prison, I'm not just going back into the prison for Black people. I'm going back into the prison for all people, because you, my brothers and sisters, we're up against the same system. Oppression is real. Slavery doesn't have a color. It has a prison number. And guess what? It's not just Black people in prison. It's also Hispanic people in prison. And this kind of violence, this kind of racism and hatred, guess where it ends up? With our people going to prison. Only to go into prison and then change their life and say, hey, we shouldn't have been against each other in the first place. And now we're out, friends, brothers and sisters, together. But this next generation shouldn't have to go to prison in order to encounter or experience that level of freedom. Because when you remove racism from your mind, guess what? You're finally free. Because if anything in your head is telling you to be separated from another man or woman, then you're already in a bondage mentally. Because we're not put here on this earth to be separated from one another. We're actually put here on this earth to be connected to one another. So let's remove, that vision, that veil of blindness, which is racism, when you can only see your race of people as human. Because the minute you've done that, you've missed the mark and you've already lost a part of your humanity. And I speak from my own experience, but I reclaim that. And this is why I am who I am right now today, my true authentic self, who has love for all and hate for none. And the message today is to love yourself. And yes, you can love your people, but love all people, because we are all people. And that's the message. So if you like this video, feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe. Once again, you're not entitled to do anything, or obligated to do anything. I'm not entitled to anything, but my arms are open. My mind is open. My heart is open, ready and willing to receive anybody that is out there, who wants to do better and wants to see this world become a better place. So peace, love, and blessings to you all. Be well, be safe, and be connected, because that's what we're here for. And this is where you belong.